who's MC, will kind of interject or kind of direct the question, perhaps.
Okay.
It's been very
Nev, hello. Nev, you're muted at the moment, but you know, I realized when I sent you that email that the way I phrased it was, I'm happy
Om Shanti. Good morning from Spain. Maybe in other countries it's good evening or good night. Welcome everybody to this session, special session about make sure that our yoga is good enough for the hard times ahead. And for this conversation, we have two beautiful souls, two dear souls, two great yogis, our brother Neville and our brother Charlie. So I will introduce them a little bit about Neville. He said, I'm happiest to be introduced. Oh, sorry. He's Neville Hodgkinson is an author and journalist who has been practicing Raja Yoga meditation for nearly 40 years. He specialized for much of his career in writing about health and medicine. His book includes I Know How to Live, I Know How to Die, The Teachings of Daddy Yankee, Journey into Inner Space, Inside Out, It's the Future, The Failure of Contemporary Science, and Will to Be Well, The Real
Sorry,
Medicine.
Enrique,
Yes?
can we just do the allocate the Spanish translation first?
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, sorry.
So Bill's just going to, Bill knows what to do.
So I share the message for everyone.
That's it. Yeah, just share in Spanish
Yes.
what the
Todos los que necesitáis traducción al español, por favor, lo que tenéis que hacer es cambiar vuestro nombre en vuestra imagen. Arriba hay 3 puntitos. Si le dais a los 3 puntitos, veréis que hay una opción de renombrar. Y en renombrar todos tenéis que poner SP en mayúsculas, como yo, ¿no? SP y después detrás vuestro nombre. Así os podrán también dividir en grupos por idioma. And so now, Mark, you will explain about the selection of language.
That's it. So just give them a few seconds to change their name, put SP in front of their name.
Sí, sí, podéis cambiar ahora el nombre, si podéis hacerlo ahora. Cambiar todos vuestro nombre y poner SP. SP en mayúscula antes del nombre. SP.
Okay, that's looking good.
I am checking.
Yes.
Antonio Losa, si puedes poner SP, por favor. SP antes del nombre. Okay, I think.
Okay, so now if you explain, I'll put the slide up, and if you could explain how they go to the translation room.
Yes. Aquí veis esta transparencia del PowerPoint. Abajo tenéis que elegir en interpretación, tenéis que elegir la opción de español, porque así entraréis en la sala de traducción.
Mark, sorry, Brother Bill and Mark. I think you have to enable translation too. Did you do that?
I cannot see, no, the translation.
Oh, okay.
You have to choose Bill as a translator. And then if you want, I can do it.
One moment. Yeah, okay.
You have to make me host for that, please.
1 minute.
Bill, you are the translator, correct?
Translator for Spanish.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I couldn't get into the Zoom app, but that should be enabled now anyway.
And I know that Neville and Charlie won't speak too fast.
Is that enabled now?
Yes, Mark. It looks
very good.
I think Brother Mark, Brother Bill, you can give the instructions now.
Okay, so he's in there. Actually, Bill is talking directly inside.
Brother Bill, you have to come back to English channel. Some of them might still be in the English channel. If you switch the language from Spanish to English, the
I can translate also, I can explain because I know from yesterday.
Oh yeah, please.
Yes, so Bill can say that. Los de habla hispana, tenéis que ir abajo a la derecha en la pantalla y veréis que hay un icono que pone, a ver cómo era el icono, interpretación. Le dais ahí a ese icono de interpretación y aparecerá español. Y ahí le dais a español y ya entráis en la sala donde está abierto traducir. Y luego ponéis mute al inglés. Interpretación, entráis en español, le dais mute al original y Bill ya está adentro y os hablará. ¿Sí?
Sounds good.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, I think we're good to go then.
Yes?
Yes. Bill, can you just double check that they can hear you in the translation room? And if you could just put a signal up if all is good. We can't hear you, Bill. Only the Spanish group can hear. Could you raise your hand if it's good? Okay, put the slide back. Sorry, 1 second. I think that some people are. So just in case anyone's not in the room.
Hi.
Is that okay, Bill? Oh, very good. Okay. Great. We're good to go.
Oh. Welcome again. Very short introductions. We have Neville Hodgkinson with us as an author and a journalist and a long-term student with the Brahma Kumaris. And our dear Charlie Br., more than 40 years in Guyana and based in Sydney, and a great soul who everyone knows. So when you want, you can start about the topic, which is make sure that our yoga is good enough for the hard times ahead.
So thank you so much, Enrique and Mark and Bill and all the brothers. It has been an incredible experience of connection, I think, for all of us all over the world at the moment. And I think Nev and I just can have a bit of a heart-to-heart chat together. So we may not follow the topic exactly, Nev, but I'm really delighted to be sharing with Nev, who's, I suppose, been a companion on the journey for about 40 years, even though we live on the opposite sides of the planet. There's always been a very lovely feeling of love and respect and sharing, and many, many things I admire about Nev. But what I really find most special is his integrity and authenticity. I think he's a person who has incredibly high principles, and I've always learned a lot from him because of his own process. He's very articulate about his own inner journey and what he's learning. And I think most of you know, when you spend time with Nev, he's always watching and learning, and I think is an amazing spiritual student in that way. And I just thought that to begin the conversation from my side, Nev, you've come into this life, and I'm sort of thinking, I suppose, a little bit about, you know, we're brothers, we're all talking openly about our journey, our process. You were married, you're in a family environment, a sort of a, you know, an emotional support unit, which is a family. And then you've taken this life of a BK life, which is a life of love with Baba, but it's also sometimes a fairly individual or solitary life too on the path. And I'm just wondering, how have you kept your heart full, a sense of belonging and care, coming from a family into this spiritual journey, establishing a relationship with Baba, how do you keep your heart full? How do you keep your sense of belonging and care in your life?
Hi, Charlie, and thank you. And good morning or good evening, wherever you are in the world, to the brothers. Big hugs to those that I know, regardless of social distancing, and big hugs to those that I don't know as well. I'd like to add my congratulations to the team who, Mark, I'm living at the Lighthouse in Worthing, and I know Mark has put in a lot of work with several others to get this very pacemaking international gathering underway. It's quite remarkable. It's a real step forward in service. And I think we're going to look back and thank the coronavirus for having given a big boost to these means of connecting that don't actually require us to jump on planes and all the rest of it. So, Charlie, yeah, we were given this topic, making sure your yoga is good enough. Actually, the original way it was put to us was, is my yoga good enough for the hard times ahead? And Charlie and I immediately just sort of spoke in advance with each other. Well, no. Okay, next question. So then it does lead on to the sort of issues that Charlie is raising. You know, what gets in the way of our yoga? Because we all know, we hear, especially from Avivek Bapdada, who sits up there from on high. It's very easy for him up there just to tell us to remember him at every second, but he hasn't got to cope with sanskars and all the rest of it down here. So that's why I so much prefer Sakar Mulis these days. I find that Sakar Baba was very, very merciful towards us, towards me. But this aspect of a sense of belonging actually is a very interesting question, Charlie. It goes probably straight to something that has been a very big challenge for me, because I definitely felt a big need to belong in my youth. I didn't, especially in my sort of teenage years, I felt very lost. I met Liz, the woman I married. We met at 18 as students. We got married at 21. And married life gave me a sense of purpose and a sense of belonging. And then it was in my mid-30s, really, that I was finding that not all was well. It just felt as if, with both of us having very striving, quite ego-driven careers, it felt to me, it was coming home to me, there's not enough love in my life. And there wasn't enough love in the life for all of us, including our two sons, I felt. So something had to break. And I consider myself incredibly fortunate to have come across the Brahma Kumaris, because when you're in that state of neediness and upheaval, where a particular way of going about life, and quite successfully in a way, you know, I had a high-powered job, we were both earning well, the kids were lovely, we had a big house, all the rest of it. But, you know, something had to break, because it wasn't working at a deeper level.
Hola. Sí, sino que prendo por alguna cosa para copiar.
Oh, translation. Sorry. Is that? Am I going too fast?
Br.Neville, la primera vez que escuchamos Br.Neville. Cuando vi acá, recién entramos.
I think someone needs to mute themselves. We're just hearing their conversation.
Oh, I see. Okay, but it is simultaneous translation, but I'm going a little bit too fast. So I will try to slow down and also come to the point, Charlie. This aspect of a sense of belonging, I got it from family. Then it was beginning to break down, and I came across the Brahma Kumaris. I felt those vibrations of truth and love from the senior yogis. In fact, from everyone, including you, who I met on my first trip to Mount Abu in about 1982, January 82. And it was something quite different, and I sort of was sustained by it, but I didn't have it for myself, because it was a kind of bubble of spirituality that I could step into. But for many years, because I hadn't really understood deeply enough that I am a soul and that I am the child of that source, that supreme father, until that penny really deeply dropped, I was
Bill, ¿no traduces?
Excuse me.
I was dependent. Could you?
Now, yes.
Someone needs to mute there.
Claro, es que no se oía.
Until that penny dropped, I was dependent on the gatherings, and I think Daddy Janki put me into a lot of committees and meetings and groups to try to support me during that period when I didn't really have my own connection. And so it was actually a tough one, because as long as you haven't really got that total deep conviction that you know you're a soul, you know you're not the limited self, you know you're not Neville, you know Neville is a part you're playing, but you're something much deeper and more lasting than that. Until that is really there, you're vulnerable wherever you are. And I felt that vulnerability, a great insecurity for many years. And I'm just so grateful that eventually it was the sense of that deep, deep truth about who I am that really led to the falling away of that insecurity.
Nev, because it's a lot of brothers we're sharing together, and sometimes I hear some brothers say that, you know, they feel a bit lonely on this path. Sometimes they feel a little bit isolated, you know, because it's a very introvert life. It's a sort of a life to really explore the self, even though we have the Brahmin family around. I mean, have you ever felt lonely? And if so, how did you sort of work with that? How did you deal with that?
Wouldn't say, actually, I don't remember on my journey feelings of loneliness. I definitely missed family life because Liz, my ex, chucked me out really because I was so enamored of the spiritual stuff, but not with real proper deep understanding. And so I was living it somewhat superficially, and not surprisingly that after our boys had grown up, that led Liz to feel that she wanted the relationship to finish. And that really left a big hole, but it wasn't so much loneliness, it was more like a wound that I felt, where a part of me, because my psyche had been very attached to Liz and the family man identity, and when that was taken away, it left a deep wound, which took a long time to heal. I would say years. And it was just a sort of time and regular study, regular practice of yoga, regular experience of the powerful vibrations of truth that would come from real yogis, ones who really understood. All of these things together eventually healed that wound. But I would say that it was more like that rather than loneliness as such. I don't know quite why I haven't felt lonely. Perhaps because I've always had company. Because after my marriage finished, I did live alone. Actually, I lived alone. Daddy sent me to buy a flat in central London, where I was doing sort of service from there, but also very, very engaged with my newspaper work. And so I just used the flat as a base for my work. And I lost myself in work, frankly, for some years. And then when it was evident that my spiritual progress was not what it needed to be, it was stalling somewhat, then Daddy accepted my sort of surrender. And I went to live with the community at GRC, the Global Retreat Center. So I've never actually been alone. And I hadn't really felt loneliness as such. I hadn't experienced that. I don't have a sanskar for it. More a sense of irritation and kind of existential angst, you might call it. I don't know if you can translate that one. But you know, just a sense of discomfort and irritation would sweep over me from time to time. But Charlie, I'm very interested, you know, just to bounce things back to you, because I know that you're playing a part elsewhere in this retreat, but I'm fascinated by the fact that our journeys are so utterly different. You know, you came to this as a young man. You were already searching. You were doing Europe, but in a spiritually seeking way. Whereas I was what you might call, I had faith in unfaith. You know, for many years, I felt that religion and faith was just a load of nonsense. I always remember some quote for, I think, Mark Twain, that faith is believing what ain't so, you know. And that was my principle in life, my ethic, if you like. So it took me a long time and a lot of searching before I could sort of really accept this stuff. But you got it straight away. And not just that, but I feel as if you brought great qualities to this journey too. So I'm interested to know, have you actually really felt that you have had some challenges along the way? Obviously, there would be. You couldn't say no, but you seem to me to be so much there as a yogi ever since I met you 40 years ago, nearly.
I suppose we all have challenges in different areas, and you know, there's no doubt, you know, I've had challenges from my sanskaras, but you know, I think a lot of the challenges that I've had to deal with in my learning curve has a lot been, you know, dealing with the Brahmin family. And you know, I have a lot of love for the divine family, but we're all on a process of change, and we go through ups and downs, and you know, sometimes after a long time stuff emerges in the souls. And I felt sometimes quite challenged when people you have a lot of love for have moved away from this life, and or there's been, you know, differences for whatever reason, and that's been something I've had to really learn a lot about, I think, because I like, you know, my DNA is to feel close and want to have loving relationships, and when they haven't been there, you know, I've had to sort of search my soul a little bit. I think one of my great lessons is just the journey of self-respect, I suppose. I have a sense that stepping into this life, it was okay, but sometimes, you know, I would lose my self-respect. And you know how easy it is to hang your sense of self-respect on the old story, which is based, especially for perhaps souls and brothers' bodies, you know, on what we do and our responsibility and these sorts of things. But it's been quite a journey, and I feel that the more I've tried to step into my self-value through my relationship with Baba, I really feel that, but it's been taking, it took really a long time, I'd say, to really develop a more stable sense of self-respect. I find that life becomes easy. I really love that thing where I think I was a bit self-absorbed at first, a bit sort of, you know, when you're sort of so self-reflective, you become a little bit intense with yourself and a little bit, I don't know, too sensitive about trying to be, you know, in the zone that Baba talks about. I just think over the years, I've learned to relax a lot and just accept myself. And I think I remember really realizing that there's some things I can do okay, and I feel very comfortable, but there's some things I don't do okay. And that's okay. You know, it's all right to sort of accept that there's areas of life I don't do very well, I'm not very good at. And you know how sometimes a lack of self-respect means you think you need to be good at everything. You need to sort of, but I think I've really relaxed over time and have felt much more accepting of who I am. And I feel that's a really big step on the journey, just to sort of accept this is who I am. And I think some years ago, I went through a few ups and downs. I just decided, to enjoy this life. This is my life with Baba. I really want to enjoy it and not sort of get too sort of rigid, religious about it. I think it's very easy to become very religious in this life. And I love to follow everything, but I also love, to be a bit natural, a bit easy, not too sort of trying to be a persona on the outside, look the right part, but something inside. I just want to enjoy, be who I am, and yet from a spiritual place. So no, definitely I've had my challenges over the years, but I think it's been 45 years now, so I feel much more comfortable internally with who I am these days.
That's amazing to me to hear, because you have always seemed comfortable with yourself, because that's the impression that one receives from you. But it's really, really good to hear that actually your journey, despite your role being so tremendously different from my own, has actually been very similar. I would say that self-acceptance is one of the biggest gifts that has come to me in recent years. Stopping that business of beating myself up for old sanskars, or not being good enough, or being too much superficial, or a whole host of things that you can choose to be dissatisfied about with yourself. But it's quite contrary to Gyan, actually. I love the way Baba was speaking recently about accept everything that has happened up to this second is in the drama, and it is what it is. And so what is the point of doing anything other than accepting it fully and loving it? Actually, that's one of the things I have also learned, that with this moving into that deeper sense of who I really am in relationship with Baba, the self-acceptance has grown, and then that's allowed me to be much more accepting of others, instead of sort of having to suppress, because I never wanted to cause hurt to others by critical vision or comments or whatever, but they would be there sometimes, and I would just suppress them. And that's not good either. It can lead to a build-up of tension inside, and ultimately some kind of explosion. There can be a lot of harm from it. But now I just have a sense of love for the drama, love for the parts that each one plays in their own individuality. But it's fabulous to hear that someone like you, who, in a way, you do fit the perfect image of. I've sometimes called Charlie the Daddy G of the West, because he seems to have so many qualities like that. But Charlie is Charlie, Nev is Nev. Each one of us is ourselves. This is great.
It is great, Nev. I totally agree, and I think a lot of the this journey of soul consciousness is a lot about self-acceptance, isn't it? And because I think when I could overreact to myself, something happens. How we overreact to my weaknesses or your sense of self. And I just think I totally agree with what you said. I found the more I feel comfortable with myself, I don't try to be something, because I think initially it's easy to create an image. You want to live up to the image that Baba speaks about. And I found the more I'm comfortable with me, as you said, I feel comfortable with others. And it's a really important thing for me in my journey to feel I accept people as they are. I feel that's like a blessing to give, and I've found that as I've gone on, the more I have self-respect, I can just, feel quite comfortable with all the variety of personalities that we're surrounded with. And I think that's something which is, really, really special. Yeah.
It's priceless, isn't it? Because it also makes it possible to keep that line with Baba open. as long as we're feeling crabby about things, that's absolutely like loud interference in the broadcast that's trying to reach us from Baba. So it's very necessary.
Talking about, this, is my yoga good enough? How much do you feel that really this sort of establishment of Baba as your prime relationship in life has filtered down into this self-acceptance and this acceptance of others, this even acceptance of the scenes of drama? Like Baba said this morning in the blessing, just, why drama, why? It's a perfect drama. And I've been through times where you fight the drama, you want the drama to be different, and yet it's such a deep truth, isn't it, that the drama is perfect. How have you come, do you feel it's through your relationship with Baba you've just started this whole journey of acceptance of self, the scenes of drama, and even the other actors around you?
Yes, definitely. And one of the beauties is that it's leading me to do what I think was always deep in the soul, that I wanted to be giving in my relationships, but I didn't know how to give properly, previously. I think it was a question of giving in those limited ways, which could just be the ego trying to do good, or trying to look after family, or trying to boost its own self-image one way or another. But what I find so lovely now, and in my case, it took really a good number of years, as I say, until that penny dropped. But with that inner sense of truth now nourishing me, I find that I'm able to go back to relationships that have been sort of, in a way, on hold for a while, and they are transformed. Instead of coming to them with neediness, I'm coming to them with some positive energy from inside, and it makes such a difference. It's marvelous to see family, friends, grandchildren all appreciating this from Grandpa Nev,
You don't seem like a Grandpa Nev.
They see something different, and it is because of this. There's an inheritance actually seeping inside from Baba, and it's transformative. That's one of the most beautiful things I've seen on this journey. The change from doing things out of my own neediness, attachment, lust, greed, anger, ego, all the rest of it, to something more giving, which of course then you can just let go more easily if things don't work out the way you want them to. It's really makes life so much more of a breeze. But it's lovely to think about, because it has taken me a good number of years to reach this. So one of the things I would say, is that don't be if you're fairly new on the journey, or if you're in the journey and it's feeling tough, just keep going, because it works. And it's such a, of course, if you're absolutely miserable, then it might be better not to spend the confluence age in that condition, but to sort of get a girlfriend or something. But otherwise, otherwise it's better to keep going and try and find this spiritual renewal, because it can really be transformative, and it's definitely what the world needs.
Yeah, I really, my experience of a lot of my change, I see service as a spiritual subject. Sometimes service can seem like a lot of activity and doing. From the perspective that I feel a lot of my change has come through giving. And I've often felt that when you're needy, you're addicted to taking that disrespect and sorrow. And I found the more I sort of take from Baba, and the whole positioning of my mental framework has been more to give, then you take less sorrow, disrespect, all those sort of things. It's this whole shift, just like Baba said this morning, from Levta to Devta, the one who takes to the one who really gives. And I think giving and bestowing is an essential part of our journey. And I think someone once asked me, what's the most beautiful life? And I think to be in love with Baba and to really, really be a person like a true bestower, in a sense, the one who really is giving love, giving respect, giving support, giving cooperation. I think that's a very fulfilling life. And as we know, even the daddies talked a lot about, I think when we're in that zone, the blessings from the hearts of many, there's an energy that is uplifting and transforming when we receive those sort of
It's
feelings.
very nice to hear you say that, Charlie. I like that idea that as we are taking more from Baba, we also become, it's not just that we're taking less, we're less needy with others in terms of needing their approval or their love or the rest of it. There's a freedom comes in that way, but also not taking the sorrow or the put downs and all the rest of it.
Yeah,
that we used
absolutely.
to have a habit of doing.
Yeah.
It's a great point.
Yeah.
Charlie, there's something I'd like to ask if we've time. I'm not quite sure how much time we have left, but I take it that Mark or someone will give us a signal at some point.
Neville, you have 15 minutes more for the conversation.
15 minutes more.
We will give you questions and then questions from the...
Oh, great. Okay. Something I'd like to ask you, Charlie, is I've wondered whether, and this is particularly relevant to brothers in this woman-led movement, whether there might be, and it might only be a projection from my own experience, but whether it's possible that some of us might find our way into something like this, be particularly vulnerable to a lack of self-respect, a lack of self-acceptance. I'm wondering whether it might be like that, because I do feel that being with the Brahma Kumaris all these years has been like a double-edged sword. On the one hand, there's been that love and support, which was healing and which ultimately allowed me to start to see the truth about myself, both negative and positive. On the other hand, and it's also a positive in a sense, there is that aspect where, there's a kind of prejudice I feel sometimes against brothers and their ego. There's a certain, it goes with it's almost like a cultural inheritance that men have dominated things for so long during these eras where limited ways of doing things, very focused ways of doing things were good for your family or your company or your tribe, all the rest of it, or your religious tribe. So men were put in charge of all of this. And now, of course, the time where that is valuable has gone, and it's now very dangerous. And so there's a shift in society generally towards seeing that those male values and predispositions are really to be questioned very deeply. But for those brothers who found their way into a movement like this, I feel as if there are some special challenges which can move us forward very well, but may also be, almost like an extra on the spiritual journey, because all great spiritual seekers have known, the ones who are really serious about it have known many pitfalls along the way. It's a tough journey to really escape past conditionings. But is this something that you think perhaps is a special feature of being with the Brahma Kumaris? How do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's extraordinary, really, how Baba was so absolutely revolutionary in, offering the leadership to women, which was such an extraordinary thing. And I've just been thinking recently, just with this Black Lives Matter movement, which is sweeping the world, and maybe the last few years, the Me Too movement. It's almost like, I think, maybe slightly off what you were asking, Nev, but, it's like we are on the journey to detaching completely from my bodily image. That's what Baba is teaching us. And almost like the world is picking it up, people are rejecting being labeled by gender or by color or by any label. There seems to be this real resentment around in the world. And I sometimes have wondered whether, you know, maybe we do, you know, in a organization where sisters are out front, maybe we can feel, and especially if we lack self-respect, a little bit of a second-class citizen. But imagine how women have felt, you know, right throughout the second half of the cycle. You know, I remember in my travels when I was, you know, before Guyana, I lived in a Buddhist monastery in Thailand, and I was staying with the monks, and they had a dining hall which was two-tiered, and the nuns had to sit on the lower tier, lower than the feet of the monks. And and really, I mean, we could all tell extraordinary stories. And I just think that on a path of change, it's really good to be challenged in this way. And I always think, and I absolutely loved, a few weeks ago, Baba said, children, you're not male or female. And I've always found this whole focus on gender, and even in the Brahmin world, getting too caught in being a brother or a sister, even that I think can become quite body conscious. Actually, in Shiv Baba's eyes, I think we're all souls, but Shiv Baba, to bring back a balance into the world, which has been so dominated by I suppose, the male energy, and whether that comes from souls in female or male bodies, because some souls in female bodies are very male in their vibration or their attitude because they've been men. And some of us brothers are quite feminine, and, you know, being open is nothing to do with sexuality in that way. It's just sort of the persona of the soul. And yeah, it is, but I really do love an organization that is, you know, when I've been to ashrams with gurus and things, I find there's not a warmth there. That's my experience. And I find that the nature of the souls in female bodies, leadership is more collaborative and more inclusive. Mm-hmm. And I really love that. And really, I think right from the beginning, I remember once I was in Delhi and I was interviewed by some journalists, and they sort of said, you know, how do you find being in a organization led by women, you know? And the way he asked it was quite sort of confronting. But actually, I've always really loved it, and I feel that it's a part of my journey to you know, let go and really respect and live in my own self-respect. And actually, I absolutely love, as I said, really in a way we're androgynous. We're not, as a soul, we've got to go beyond even this labeling as well. And I feel a great power of the Brahma Kumaris is the sisters that are responsible. And perhaps sisters, the souls in sisters' bodies have to step into their power. And we have to really deal with, you know, create humility and deal with perhaps our ego or the rights that are bestowed on the male role in this world.
Okay, I'd like to press you a bit further on that, Charlie.
Is it time for question and answer yet, brothers?
Not quite.
No, that's fine, Dave.
Yeah, just I'd like to explore it a little bit further, because I feel that I picked up within the Brahma Kumari's teachings that ego is necessarily a vice, and I'm not sure that that is really a helpful way of thinking about things. What I mean by that is that we have a body, and it's part of our reality as a human being, and Baba teaches us to value it and care for it, because he says he can't speak to us without having a body himself and us having ears to hear. So we have a body, even though we're not that body. We have an ego, even though we're not that ego. Psychologists tell us that a certain ego structure is absolutely essential for anyone. It's just like a sense of who you are in a limited way, like you're aware that you have a male identity. So you know which loo to go into, for example. You don't have to ask yourself every time, should I go into the gents or the ladies? And that's putting it at a gross level. But, you know, there is a certain level of assumptions about your ego identity with which you have to live, and it allows you to play your role, just like an actor would know that he had his part to play. Where it becomes a vice is when we lack connection with the deeper truths, and so we lack self-respect, and we try and boost our self-respect through a demanding ego, demanding on the self, demanding on others. Everything goes wrong then, definitely. But I feel that in my earlier years, I rather sort of put myself down within the Brahma Kumaris. It might just have been my sanskars, I acknowledge that. Certainly I played my part in it. But I feel as if there was not I feel as if sometimes there's a dearth of recognition of the value of ego, even though, as you say, quite a few sisters have a very constructive and powerful ego with which they achieve a lot. And I feel that some men may actually get what I would regard, perhaps after all these years, as a wrong end of the stick here in thinking, oh, I've got to sort of quell my ego. Perfectly true, that demanding ego, that negativity that comes from a hungry ego, that has to be quelled through yoga and self-understanding. But you can't kill it completely any more than you can kill the body and still remain as a human being. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the way I'm hearing what you're saying is it's sort of how you define what ego really is. I think the way I've understood it from Baba is that ego is like a form of an attachment to a limited identity, a temporary identity in that sort of way. I mean, the way I was hearing what you were saying is just because, you know, I have an identity in a way that's my ego. But I think that one thing that helped me a few years ago is when Baba said, children, for spiritual progress, let go the eye of arrogance and the eye of disheartenment and emerge the eye of soul consciousness. And it really sort of helped me perhaps position where ego sits, that is almost like a battle inside. There's the original me, but there's like three personalities, three sets of sanskars, perhaps I could say. And when the soul forgets itself and only identifies with the limited self, it produces the two children of the ego of superiority and the ego of inferiority. And they're like identities that I've built that are attached to this temporary identity of this body. And the way I sort of see it is when, you know, my ego is ruling my inner system, I call it the eye of arrogance, the eye of lack of self-respect. Sorry, the eye of arrogance, the eye of superiority. It has a whole thinking, feeling, behavioral structure. I think I'm better. I know more. Even Baba defined a few years, the thing of ego is when I feel I'm right, my perception of life is accurate. But when it comes into my feelings, when I feel, how do I know I'm under the influence of it? Is when I feel easily insulted, disrespected, non-valued, excluded, sensitive. That's when I'm being deceived by an attachment to a limited identity. And on the other side, the eye of lack of self-respect or the ego of inferiority compares, and you feel not good enough, unworthy, not loved. And when it comes into your feeling, sort of that hopelessness, which I feel is omnipresent in our world today. No matter how confident people look, there's a deep hopelessness inside. And these are personas that are in all of us. the ego of superiority, the ego of inferiority, that distort, because the seed of my sense of identity is false. It's grown a false tree of ego on as inferiority and superiority. And the I is sort of really, the new practice is to step back into my permanent identity, the eternal identity of the soul. And my sense is the more I practice that, my ego of superiority and inferiority have less power over me. And so whether, you know, the more I become soul-conscious, I'm still a personality as such, but, you know, it's that sort of, I think Bubba's talking about the ego born out of the temporary identification with my temporary body. That's how I understand it.
Definitely. That is the way Bubba usually refers to the ego. But I feel that there is, you know, this pure ego, or the deities will have they won't have a sense of separation, but they'll have that clarity about who they are, that allows them to negotiate life with complete harmony with one another, because it'll just be giving. And I feel as if it's possible to experience that now. In fact, very desirable to practice that now, actually. That to practice the qualities that might come with a male body, for example, or with a female body, or with an in-between body, to practice this now. You know, not only, definitely the going regularly, touching base with that deep truth, that eternal truth, that's absolutely fundamental to transforming me as a human being. But ultimately, I want to find that I'm living the life as a human being here, with my sort of brain reprogrammed by Baba, and my heart healed by Baba, so that I'm a functioning human being, and I would still have a sense of personality. But it would be different from other people. There would be gender differences, but that doesn't make me lesser as a person.
Yeah, totally. You know, maybe the word ego, you know, is defined in psychology, and ego is defined by Barbara. You know, it's sort of, you know, in psychology, they see it as a sort of a part of who you are, whereas Baba sort of sees it as the way Baba defines as more of a vice.
Yes, absolutely.
So maybe it's slightly confusing
I think so, yeah.
Definitions.
Yeah, I think it's good to sort that one out, actually. I think that I think, as I indicated earlier, I think that sometimes that brothers come into this. Again, this is my own experience, really, but from knowing others too, I wonder whether sometimes we do come into it with more of a lack of self-acceptance and self-respect, partly because of the ego creating a lot of trouble, and we want to do something about it. And this is a very good method of doing something about it, to come into an organization like this. It's a great thing, but it's not the it might not have the final word on it, I feel.
So you want to say something, Charlie? Something more?
Because no, I was just going to say that, you know, just in response to Nev, that, you know, the more I think I lack self-respect, I have that ego of inferiority, I build that ego of superiority in a way to protect my vulnerability. And so, yes, I can understand that this sort of sometime, I think, you know, the reality is, I think almost all BKs walk into Brahman life with a pretty low self-esteem. I think it's a part, we're old souls. And so it's a part of our journey where we walk in Baba's door with, you know, I've often thought the whole of this life is really stepping out of an addiction on my vision on myself and stepping into Baba's vision. And Nev, that's what I sort of see a soul like Daddy Janki, who had so much courage, because it is an addiction, this self-perception, this self-belief or lack of self-belief that is so deeply ingrained. Intellectually, you can talk about it, but to really move out of it.
Yeah.
And yet I saw someone like Daddy Janki really step and accept Baba's drishti, that you are this elevated soul, you know. And I feel that's a lot of the journey.
Fabulous example of that. Absolutely, Charlie.
Yeah.
Yeah. So lovely that we have these very different examples in front of us, isn't it? Of the daddies.
Yeah.
And the senior brothers, all absolutely unique and quite content to be unique.
Yeah.
Not all sort of molding themselves into one sort of stamped out perfect BK image, but utterly unique. This is something I value very much in this family.
Yep, likewise.
So thank you very much for this rich conversation. And now let's have a few questions from the brothers for you. I have now one of them. It says, let me take my glasses, are not here. Oh, well. So small. How much should we be engaged in conversation with Baba in our sitting yoga practice versus practicing bodiless incorporeal stage? What is your best practice to stay in remembrance in action?
Nev, do you want to kick off?
I find I'm quite one of these sort of rather unconscious yogis, in the sense that I've never been very systematic when I sit in yoga. I just tend to jump into feelings of love and appreciation and happiness, sort of going beyond the everyday, or I don't. You know, if it works, it works, and I get strength and power from it. And I'm not so good if I've got other things going on, and I don't sort of. I think Charlie's better one to answer this, because I feel Charlie is a meditation master who can tell you step by step how to make the connection when otherwise it might not be coming so naturally. So over to you, Charlie.
Yeah. Thanks, Nev. I suppose for me, I felt that, you know, to be more creative, because I think sometimes it's funny when it comes to our life out there, we're so creative in doing new things. But it comes to my thoughts and my relationship with Baba, we often almost follow a system like a meditation commentary. And so to keep alive the sort of the newness and the freshness, sometimes, a bit of a heart-to-heart chat with Baba, sometimes to really understand something more deeply, sometimes to absolutely be bodiless. I love to try and go so far beyond that I'm not pulled away. I feel absolutely present with Shiv Baba and absorbing. Sometimes, when I feel I just want to be loved like a child. So there's many different facets. But one of the things I've been exploring recently, actually during the COVID thing, is that I sort of realized a little bit that I have on one side my yogi life, my meditative life, and on the other side, my action life, my doing life, my service life. And you know how sometimes it's sort of slightly separated in your head. Or this is the time that I'm sort of a yogi and meditate. This is the time I'm busy. And I've really tried to bring it together. And one of the things I've absolutely explored recently, my whole research is around remembrance. What is it really? And I'm really loving this. And one of the things I'm trying to do is observe how the mind processes, how the mind is always so engaged with its own process and analysis that I sort of get absorbed in myself, and to really use those moments of time to remember Baba. So you know, there's actually so much time in the day, and trying to create a habit rather than leaving a meeting and processing and starting to think about what people said, go to Baba. You know, all these moments I have to train myself to really connect and feel in company with Baba, because I think those little moments build an influenced by the world around me. So I think we really have to be creative, but I think, you know, we really are karma yogis, and that means that I'm a yogi soul living a life in the physical world in relationship with people and having responsibility, so that my yoga is really working in my real life. It's not that I'm separate. I'm separating out, you know, different parts of my journey. And I think that's become, I feel that's what we really have to learn at the moment, because, you know, really to keep connected during action, because I think our deep addiction from bhakti is to do an action to get a result. And that's why we're so used to wanting to get an outcome from an action. That's where my yoga goes. But Baba's the opposite. He's really saying, remember me and then come into action. And then you're more naturally detached and less influenced when I do that. Yeah, so.
Wonderful. So another question says one brother, in recent previous Murlis, Baba has said not to go to the cinema, recently stating that it was the gateway to hell. I don't go to see I do go to see informative document type films. I understand that these stories are just part of the drama, but I enjoy hearing as a detached observer. I don't get influenced by them. Can I no longer watch? If so, how far should this be taken, as by inference television documentaries should not be watched either?
Charlie?
Nev and I are both waiting who's going to respond. You know, if I can say one thing, that, you know, where the history of this is that, you know, Brahma Baba, you know, he tells his own story that he went to a movie when he was young, and it was a romantic movie. And that's really what inspired him to get married. And so Baba, and yet I think there's a deeper level of this, that, you know, we all carry sanskaras, and certain environments, atmospheres, images can trigger feelings. And sometimes we can just see an image on a computer, an image in a film, and it can trigger stuff that really, especially lust, which, you know, and if it gets sort of inside, then it can create trouble over a period of time. So Baba's, in a sense, giving suggestions how to avoid environments which trigger old sanskaras. And that probably, I think in this case, not just lust, but the feelings of needing support, companionship, and all that sort of stuff. I don't know what Nev feels about that.
Yeah, I would agree with what Charlie said. I would say that I think it's definitely possible to view certain documentaries, of course, and occasionally there's a key Murli. Sorry, not a Murli, a key movie. that is kind of part of the current culture, and that it may be worth seeing. That said, and I would also completely agree with Charlie about the insidious effect of exposing ourselves to movies, because of the skill that is even greater today than it was in Brahma Baba's day, by the movie makers, of tapping into aspects of our conditioning that kind of are fed by violence, the sex, the intrigue, the paranoia, whatever it might be. And it really is like I've experimented, because there've been times when I've been to movies that on the face of it were not full of, you know, rubbish, but actually could still have that deleterious effect on my consciousness, and I've seen it.
Yeah.
So I really, I mean, he calls it the mother of sin as well, the cinema, but which is quite fun. But I you know, I don't think that it's necessary to get religious about it, but to have very clear understanding of the dangers, and to be very cautious in that area.
Very good. So maybe this question is connected. You said that Baba has reprogrammed us, our mind. So the question is, how do I achieve this definitely reprogrammation, no? Reprogramming of my mind?
I feel that this is where the study has played such a big part for me, because for whatever reason, when I began my journey, I was very open to these vibrations of truth, as I would call it, those that sort of self-transcendence that that the daddies were so good at sharing from their own deep soul consciousness, and even with Brahmins who'd only been doing this for a few months or a few years, I experienced this to begin with. It was as if some deep memory of the capacity to know myself more deeply was there, but I would only experience it in any kind of continuing way when I was actually in the company of Brahmins. And when I was away in the newspaper office, there was a big change in my work from the start, because I was receiving something from this that was healing of my heart and my neediness. But that was still sort of semi-temporary. Real power didn't come until the change in my self-understanding, and that took much longer. And I would say that the big thing that allowed me to do it, because I came, as I said, from a position of extreme materialist faith, if you like, was the Murli. I couldn't get the Sakar Murlis to begin with. I could sort of half understand Avyekt Murlis, but Sakar Murlis, they were like, you know, Baba says sometimes that like drops of water on a hot pan, just gone in an instant. And I was rather like that for my first few months. But then something happened that made me just resolve, I will not let a day go by without hearing Baba's wisdom. And that has been my record for about 38 years, something like that. And it's that has really changed me. It led to, I feel that this is the brilliance of this journey. On the one hand, the yoga and the help we get with yoga from practiced yogis. On the other hand, this study. The Sakar Murlis are geniuses because Baba is there. He's not just Shiv Baba, but you've got that human being, Brahma, working with Shiv Baba to transform himself. And we hear about that in a very real way. Every day that's on offer. I can't emphasize enough. I think I would have moved faster if I'd given more time to the Murli study, but at least I've heard it every day for all those years. And ultimately, I would attribute the rewiring, if you like, of my brain that has taken place to that exposure to Baba's wisdom and that incredible spark of that creative spark of Shiv Baba and Brahma Baba working together. I think it's unique. I've looked at quite a few different paths, and I just find this is an incredible element in the Spiritual University.
Thank you, Nev. I have a question for you, Charlie. It says, this spiritual path is a long one. When you scale an exhausting hill, you may realize an even bigger mountain needs to be covered, and so on. How do you deal with what can be a shock of the realization of the sheer magnitude of work still to be done, despite making progress bit by bit?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. You know, there's two ways of looking at this life. You can see how far you have to go, and that feels, oh my goodness, you know, when Baba talks about perfection, purity, or you can see how far I've come. And I feel like every single person on this call, I think we should have a lot of self-esteem that we've stepped onto this journey. You know, we're trying to live our truth. We're all at a different level of it, but that's, you know, people are complaining about the world and resentful about, but we've actually engaged with learning about myself. And I feel that I like to see that, yes, I've come a long way rather than how far I have to go. There's no doubt there's many steps to come. But always I feel that the way my personality is, that I feel when the heart is full, I feel that is a constant sort of momentum of enthusiasm. I really do. And what I love to do to keep not the feeling that, oh, it's a long path, it's high journey, it's steep, and I feel a bit tired just thinking about it. What I love to do is wake up and sit in front of Shiv Baba like a little child, like a baby, and feel loved. I just feel, you know, sometimes you can feel your mind can go, I've got to do this, and there's so much to do. You know, you have your list of tasks, and yet I sometimes feel if I just become a child, and I feel loved, and I really try to observe, do I block that love in any way? Because to me, there's nothing more precious than the love of God. There's no more pure energy to heal and transform me. And I feel I've got to prepare my intellect in the early morning to really receive, feel loved, and I find my whole inner world cools down, and enthusiasm. As I think you would know better than me, that I think it's from Greek, that enthusiasm means like a love for God. Theos is God. It just comes, that sense of, and I really, you know, I feel I'm not only, you know, Baba tells us about the aim, I love the process too. Sometimes it's challenging, but I love this incredible journey of learning about myself and learning to observe, trying to be objective, not in denial on one side or not too critical on the other side, but really trying to develop an objectivity where I'm at and what I need at that time. And so, yeah, I think it's that love, which is really, I would say, the great motivation to keep me moving forward, the experience of love.
Thank you. I cannot see the questions now. So one question was, how do you understand homosexuality in the context of spirituality and the cycle in this moment in the cycle?
Can you repeat the question, Enrique? I didn't quite catch it.
How do you understand homosexuality? Homosexuality. Yes. In the context of spirituality and in the cycle in this moment of time?
You know, I really love the truth that Baba gives us. We're all souls. And, you know, I think in Sakamuli a few times, Baba says the soul won't be in a particular body of the same sex for more than 2 births. So maybe maximum 2 of a female, maximum 2 of a male. And so we carry sanskaras of the part of a male and a part of a female. But sometimes I think near the end of the cycle, they become so strong that the, you know, and the sexual orientation is different. And I think there's a lot, when you look at this world now, there's homosexuality, there's transgender. It's like, you know, the soul is programmed and it's so confused by the gender of the body, you know, like, and this is why I really love Baba. It's so clear that actually I'm in a sense, I'm in a body that has a gender, but I'm a soul, an eternal soul. And I really love the idea that Baba's educating us to become male and female together. And perhaps what we do as a BK is we learn the power of action is represented by the male energy, and the power of virtue is represented by the female energy. And maybe that's why Baba gave the responsibility of the yajna to sisters, because that maybe the virtue of life has been overpowered by the male energy, because in this world, maybe men and women are quite male, and to bring in that sort of softer energy. But to me, it's just the programming of the soul from past lives. And I don't know what Nev feels about that.
Well, it's not exactly directly addressing the question of homosexuality, but Charlie mentioned this aspect of transgender identification too, when children grow up feeling so strongly that they're in the wrong body. And I remember Sister Genti being asked about this, and she felt that it might have to do with end times, actually, that because of strong sanskars of a particular nature, because of the fact that we've all had so many different incarnations and different ways of expressing sexuality through the centuries, that that if we're kind of now settling some of that, then actually there may be occasions where people might move faster towards settlement if they actually have part of their life in one, living as one gender, and then the other part living in another gender. That's just something I remember. It was a speculation on her part, but definitely I feel, looking back, because I did a lot of work on AIDS some while back, and as a journalist, and it just showed me at the time when that was first breaking out the extraordinary intolerance that many Western so-called civilizations had towards same-sex sexual expression. It was quite extraordinary. It was regarded, as a it was listed in the American Dictionary of Psychopathology alongside sort of psychoticism and murder or whatever. And I feel that the much greater openness towards our different ways of feeling and being and loving is a very good thing that has come in these recent decades. Even with the children who are being given contrary hormones, so that even before puberty they can start to live in the opposite sex that they feel is their true one. I've seen examples of this where it really worked. The child is so much happier, and there must be good in that. But ultimately, I would also agree with Charlie that if only people could make that transition away from identifying with the body and the brain wiring that is put into the body by our sanskars and hormones working together. If only people could disidentify with that and engage with that source, that pure source of truth, then it would save so much trouble.
Thank you so much. I think it's time for small groups, because if not, there will be no time for sharing. But it was really good and very deep. There are many questions, but we have to decide. So we have been talking, and we have decided to take a few minutes for sharing also in the small groups. So I have two questions taken from the conversation. One is, how do you keep this feeling of belonging with Baba? What is your method to keeping this feeling of belonging with Baba? And what has been one of your main lessons in this spiritual life? What has been one of your main lessons in this spiritual life? I repeat, how do you keep this feeling of belonging with Baba? And what has been one of your main lessons in this spiritual life?
Enrique, are these the questions for the small groups?
Yes.
So I can just give a couple of instructions for the breakouts. Just that the Spanish will automatically go into Spanish groups. When I click the button to move you, there will be a box comes up on your screen, which is asking you to move to a breakout room. So please click accept if you want to go into that breakout room. We found that several people end up left in the main session, which is where we are now. So what I need you to do is raise your hand, either your physical hand, or if you don't have camera on, raise the hand on from the reactions, which is at the bottom of the screen. You click on that and you can choose a hand, doesn't matter which one, so that I know that you want to be moved, because I don't want to move you if you don't want to. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, let's move.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Nev. Lovely to chat with you.
Big thanks from me too to you and everyone listening, and to this amazing team.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Enrique, Bill, Mark, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Charlie. Thanks, Ned.